Welcome to the Celebrating Women podcast. Mandee and Ashley Fisher dig into conversation about women, their issues, their thoughts, their lives, and celebrate their gifts, their talents, their courage. It's the Celebrating Women podcast. Presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Hey there, it's Mandee. And I've shared the secret of where I go to relax and where I like to unwind. It's Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler. They really have become an essential part of my self-care routine. I go monthly, sometimes more frequently, to get a massage, and they help me with my skincare too. I recently went to have a facial and I decided it was time for an upgrade. I chose the Nano Infusion Experience. And if you are looking for the top service for your skin, this is it. I left not only looking fabulous, but really feeling that way too. Holly took amazing care of me and my skin was so radiant and glowing. Y'all, I was dewy for days. This process infuses your skin with custom serums without needles or downtime, and it's customized for your needs. It might be my favorite skincare treatment yet. The next time you have a special event or you want to splurge and indulge yourself, this is what you want: the Nano Infusion upgrade to your dermalogical facial. Schedule now by visiting Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa, located in Cumberland Shopping Center in Tyler, or book online at handandstonetyler.com.
Okay, well, welcome back. It's the Celebrating Women podcast. I am Ashley Fisher.
I'm Mandee and we have a special guest today.
I am Celeste Smith.
Yay.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Glad to be here.
We are super excited to have you today because I think this conversation is so needed and so important. We want to hear about you. We want to hear about what it is that you do, your passions, and then we have some nerdy questions for you too.
I love nerdy questions.
Great. You'll fit right in.
Yay. So just give us a synopsis. Who is Celeste Smith?
Oh, wow. Well, I think first and foremost, I am a mother of four, a wife, but also a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified eating disorder specialist. And I'm also working on my certification in sex therapy. And that's like a 2.5-year process. So I'm like halfway through it.
Nice.
So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
We need
and
you.
A total nerd. So I'm glad that we'll be having nerdy questions.
Yay, we love nerdy questions.
Yes.
So that is a lot of really interesting things that everybody deals with, like in some form or fashion. Everybody deals with trauma of some sort. Everybody deals with something in regards to food and body image. And of course, everybody deals with sex at some point in their life. And those are all things that are really important to talk about. I want to know first, because this whole conversation around mental health, it's finally gaining traction with people. Like we're finally beginning to really understand its importance. But I know that there are so many people, like we were talking off mic about how women, we tend to just kind of push forward, even when we're sick as a dog and, not acknowledge the things going on with us. So can you give our listeners, what is the definition of trauma? And because I think we hear this word a lot and it's either overused in some places, underused in others, but just for our listeners, what is trauma?
So I would actually say trauma is, what's really important to know, is trapped in our nervous systems. There are events or things that happen in our life that our body actually holds. And so it's different for everybody. So I'm always really cognizant not to over define it, honestly, because there's a lot of comparison of I just had a friend telling me last night, I am comparing, her father's actually, diagnosed with early stage dementia. I mean, in his late 50s. And she's like,
painful.
It's so hard because I just know that other people have it worse. And that's trauma.
Yeah.
And so I think that what one person might define as trauma would be completely different. And there are some people who might have, all of these small events that you kind of would look past or not really think about. And when it compiles, it really is trauma.
Has an effect.
Yeah. And so I think you just hit it really well. Trauma is about the impact that it makes, less than the event that's happened. But of course, we think of the big things, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. But things can be traumatic, prolonged, we've talked about religious trauma, and kind of the stuff that happens that we just completely normalize and think like, oh, that's not a big deal. Everybody goes through that. But if it's impacting your actions or your life, then it's worth like treating and dealing with. So
what you're saying is you don't, to qualify as someone who has experienced trauma, we'll put it that way, you don't have to have experienced a car accident that killed your best friend. You might have experienced someone gaslighting you over a series of events or over a period of time that leads to such an impact on your life that qualifies as trauma.
Yeah, that is very well said. That's exactly what I would say.
Okay.
She's so smart. I like keeping her around.
Can you just come around and summarize everything for me?
Yeah. Well, I just think, again, this podcast obviously is geared toward women. And I think women are in some ways the world's worst at pushing through things that we shouldn't and pushing past moments that lead to more pain. Like we talked about off mic, I don't know if we were recording or not, but, you having like an upper respiratory infection and you didn't even realize that you worked all day and then you go to the ER and realize, oh, my O2 levels are at 80%. Like we just tend to do that. And I think that there are so many of us that still kind of qualify, well, I don't really need to go talk to anybody about what I'm experiencing because someone else has it so much worse than I do, or that's not what I experience is not trauma. When, it is.
The number of times that I hear somebody in my office say, like, well, I don't even know if this counts, but like I really have a struggle like trusting people and feeling comfortable being vulnerable. And I had this experience of X, Y, and Z in my past, but I don't know if that counts.
I so relate to that.
Who's counting? Like,
yeah,
everything deserves treatment and freedom from suffering and struggle. So
So at what point should someone go, maybe I'm not qualified or equipped enough on my own to just stuff this down or to deal with it on my own? When should somebody reach out to somebody like you?
Yeah, I think this is probably like unpopular opinion. I just feel like everybody should just have like a therapist in their pocket.
I totally agree.
I agree with you 100%.
1,000% agree.
Don't wait till your marriage is in shambles.
Yes.
Like as a therapist, like that's always the hardest thing because it's like, wow, this is a mess. Like, how did it get this way? And so, like, you could actually just go see somebody, like, early in marriage before anything is in crisis, and then they know your background. Not, not weekly, not monthly, but just like a check-in. They know your background. They know the stuff that you're going through. And then by the time you're in crisis, it's like, oh, I have the picture.
So I completely agree with you. And I think that it's so important. It's like going in for a regular checkup, right, to your doctor, having a physical once a year. If you're going to see a therapist regularly, you do know what your baseline is, right? And especially with your marriage. But let's just say one of you is open to that, maybe the female, because I find that this is common, and the husband's not, because he maybe thinks that the therapist is going to take the wife's side, or he feels ganged up on, or maybe he just doesn't know how to communicate his feelings, so he's scared. Of course, he's not admitting any of these things. How would you approach that if you're like, if we have somebody listening that says, like, I'm in this boat, I definitely we need therapy. How do I get my husband to come with me?
That is such a challenge. I think we just need to do a better job, especially with men, normalizing mental health care. I don't think we've done a great job at that. And I will say, like, I'll validate that experience happens sometimes. And if that experience is happening to you, like a couples therapist isn't there to take sides. And if that's happening, like, I always say therapists are like pants. Like there are some pants that just aren't for me. No offense to anybody, but like back in the 2000s, remember the rhinestone butt pants? That was not for me.
Agreed.
That was just not for me. I was like,
but great for other people.
Great for other people, fine.
I did it,
That's
y'all.
okay.
That's okay.
That was for you. That was for you. And so, and I'm sure that there are things, or like I would say jewelry. Like it's just, it's something that's so individualized and you get to decide. Like there may be bad therapists, so I don't want to say there aren't bad therapists.
Well, just like in any profession, there are people who are going to be better at it than others, right?
Yeah.
And people who are going to be a better fit for you. How would you, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry if I am, but like, how would you go about finding somebody?
Yeah, I think that too is just, sitting down and interviewing. A lot of therapists do consultation calls, like 15-minute consultation calls, and just seeing if like this feels like a good connection. And then the other thing is like to say that to the therapist, like, hey, I really feel like you're ganging up on me or siding. Like this is the beauty of therapy is really a space where you can do what we all need to be doing in our regular relationships, which is like having these real honest conversations about how we feel. And hopefully the therapist has enough like grounding and has done enough of their own work that they can hold space for hearing something like that.
Yeah.
So I would say we need to do better. And like, if that's happening to you, like it's okay to switch therapists, and it's also okay to call your therapist out. We're humans too,
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome advice. I'm kind of, like an older millennial. So people younger than me, it's kind of on trend to go to therapy and, all this. But people older than me, it's much more of a challenge. And I think it challenges them on many levels just because, like my parents' generation was raised, I think I learned this from you, from the silent generation. They were literally called the silent generation. And so that's why our grandparents and our great-grandparents were locked down. Like they were just lock boxes of all of their stuff. And then they raised kids who, it was more behavioral, like, hey, cut that out, as opposed to, hey, babe, like what's going on?
What's causing the behavior?
What's causing it? Let's dig a little deeper. And I think it's just so important to acknowledge that trauma in your life can look like so many different things. If it's something that you are waking up with that's just kind of always on the radar, maybe consider reaching out and going and talking about that thing. And maybe consider too that you're not equipped enough to handle it completely. And it just always helps. One of the most beneficial things in my life, especially over this last year, has been going to a third party who knows nothing about my life except for me just being able to say, here's what's gone on. Now you are an objective party. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that look like? What is that? Is that healthy? Is it not? Can I call that trauma? Or having someone, especially a professional who's educated, look at me and say, hey, that's religious trauma. Or, hey, that's sexual trauma. That's so empowering. I think maybe some people are scared to death of that moment because it just sounds scary, but it's so empowering to
name it.
To name it, because then it's like, oh, that's a thing.
And you can control it.
You can
do something about it.
Yes, and you can, from there, it's like, okay, well, let's tackle that booger and like, let's, So what would you tell the person that's kind of on the fence, who's either like a little skeptical or just scared to death?
Yeah. Oh, I'd say like that's totally valid to be scared to death. It's scary to work on our junk,
Yeah.
I want to hit on two things that you said there. One is kind of this concept of this generation. I really hope my Pepall is not listening. They live in the middle of nowhere, not even in a town in Louisiana. So I'm not even sure they have Wi-Fi at their house. So I think I'm safe. But
safe space.
Sorry, Pepall, if you're listening. But I have a Pepall, love him, greatest person, like just such a person who has loved me and been there for me. He was a Vietnam War veteran, actually was responsible for the atomic bomb testing,
Wow.
and so was a part of that. And he never talks about it, never, ever, ever. And it's just been fascinating to like watch him throughout my life, because he makes fun of my job in a very loving way, but he's always like,
he doesn't understand it.
He just thinks all my clients are teenagers that need to be spanked.
Gotcha.
I'm like, okay, thanks, Peppo. I don't think that's going to help them. So definitely of this generation of like, oh, like that's ridiculous.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Get over it.
Yeah. So on one hand, he's very proud of me, but then on the other hand, he's like, these people, you just send them to me and I'll straighten them out.
Sounds like it up, Buttercup.
Exactly. Well, you know my Peppa. So I have this vivid memory when I was probably like between the ages of 9 and 11 of being at their house, and my Peppa drinks coffee sun up to sundown. I don't know how he does it. Like I tell him all the time, I need coffee to work. I don't understand how you're drinking coffee and laying your head on a pillow.
Yeah.
I'm like every morning, like, come on, coffee, get me through. So he passes his morning cup of coffee. This is like maybe 9 o'clock in the morning across like the table, and I get a whiff of it, and I say, your coffee smells funny. And he just looks at me and goes, shut up. And it was years later, I was an adult when I realized, it was like bourbon or whiskey or something in his coffee. And so like here, like when people say like, oh, we didn't have mental health back then, you did. You were just treating it different, like in what I would call unworkable ways. And I define workable by, does it help me build a deeper, more richer, more meaningful life?
Yeah.
Drinking alcohol in the morning, it probably does not help you build a deeper, richer, more meaningful
Or
life.
all day. Drinking the coffee all day.
It's probably why it helps him go to sleep.
Probably. I mean, that explains why he was able to sleep so well. Yeah. And I'm sure that it dulled some senses, that it helped dull maybe some hard memories. Yeah. So it was a coping mechanism.
And we want to look at that and judge that. But I don't. I actually look at that with incredible compassion.
Absolutely.
Like he's doing the best he could do with the skills and the tools that he has. And now we have better skills and tools.
Yeah.
And so when I hear people, I hear a lot of just like negativity about this like kind of TikTok generation that's like very open about mental health. But I'm like, wow, they have skills and tools to talk about and even words and language to define the things that they're experiencing. And like you said, that's so empowering to know, oh, this is a thing. It has a word. It has a course of treatment. Like I don't have to struggle with it. Like I was telling you earlier when we were off mic that I share a practice with a maternal mental health practice. And I can't tell you how many mothers just think like these ways I'm thinking and feeling, oh, it's just normal, just baby blues, just like, you know what, and we kind of almost normalize it in our language. And then for them to go in and have a professional say, you know, that's postpartum anxiety and we can actually do X, Y, and Z about it is like, oh.
You don't have to suffer.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You do not have to suffer. And until you know that, you will suffer. You just will, because until we know better, because for first-time moms in particular, our system kind of sucks when it comes to looking after their mental health. You know, at my 6-week appointment after having my first kiddo, you know, checking me up, okay, yeah, you're good to go. You can start exercising again. You can blah, 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 blah. Now, how are you feeling? How you doing? Good. And I'm thinking to myself, I mean, I'm sure that every first-time mom feels exhausted, gets angry sometimes when the baby cries, but I've done everything that I can do to make him happy. I'm exhausted. I don't really, I just feel like crap all the time. But yeah, and all I said was, good. Okay, bye-bye. You know, and I dealt with postpartum depression for 2.5 years before I had a friend go, yeah, I don't think you're supposed to feel like that all the time. And with postpartum depression and anxiety, if you don't deal with it with like your first kiddo, it just, correct me if I'm wrong, it gets worse after every consecutive pregnancy. It just kind of builds on itself. And, you know, thank God I had somebody in my life to go, Ashley, like, no, you don't have to feel like that all the time. So, you know, and I say that with like about first time moms, but anybody, if you're struggling emotionally, and that's not a weakness, by the way, because everybody has we have our struggles. Everybody does. I don't care who in your mind is like the superwoman or superman who just does it all with a smile on their face. They have struggles. I guarantee it. But like anything that's going on, you don't have to just sit with that and deal with that and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and suck it up, buttercup. There are such wonderful resources out there that you need that will equip you to live healthier, to feel better. So my question, Celeste, like in the work that you do, what have you seen when people come to you and you start holding the mirror up to themselves and start shedding light on, hey, like, yeah, that's trauma. What you experienced is trauma, or what you experienced is, sexual abuse, or whatever it may be. When people really dig in and they start doing that work, what have you noticed are the benefits to that person? Like, what starts to happen?
Yeah, I think that's so. It's so scary. I think it's scary because when you try to have those conversations with people, and you kind of hit on this earlier, the great thing about a therapist that is like better than talking to, like, have friends, have family. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Everybody needs that. The really great thing about, the only thing that I feel like is especially unique about having a therapist is, first off, like, yes, of course we have like training and skills and that kind of thing with which to help people process things. Like, your friend doesn't know how to do EMDR, which I think we're going to talk about today. But the other thing is we are less likely to have what I call blocks around you struggling. Everybody has blocks. This is why, sorry, moms, I'm not trying to call out moms, but this is why I'll throw myself under the bus. My oldest last week and husband were having like a little conflict, and I'd just gotten off of work, and I came home, and my husband said, "You might need to talk to her."
Your daughter.
Oh, yay. And so I walk in, I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" And she's explaining it to me. And honestly, like, as I was walking back to the hallway, I knew, like, I had just left a session. My office is woefully too close to my house. There was not time for me to be in a headspace to like recenter,
Yeah.
And so she's telling me this, and I'm just getting so frustrated, right, with her, and fearful. And so I start talking to her, and then she says to me, "This kind of sounds like a lecture, Mom." And I'm like, I don't think I handled that or took that very well in the moment. So even though, like, here I am, I have all this training and skill, literally I teach this stuff to people, to parents who have kids that have eating disorders, emotionally focused family therapy. It's like what I do.
Yeah.
And here I am not even using those skills.
Yeah.
And why is that? And it's because I have my own blocks. And usually blocks are one of three, which is fear, guilt, or anger/resentment, right? And so when you try to talk to people in your life about trauma that you've experienced so often, they have their own blocks come up. So even though they would want to, if you ask them, do you want to support your loved one? They would say, absolutely yes.
Yeah.
But in that moment, they cannot see past their own blocks.
Right.
And so what's great, the first thing that I think is great about talking to a therapist about your trauma is they're less likely. It's not impossible for a therapist to have blocks. Sometimes we do. Hopefully we can see them and process through them ourselves. But they're less likely to have those blocks where they feel the need to diminish or minimize or make excuse for, and they're less likely to create harm in that. So that's the first beauty that I see is like, somebody who can just like hold space for this heaviness or this thing I experienced without saying, well, at least, or, like, I didn't think it was that bad, or whatever the things that we might say. And the second thing is to be able to have somebody in the room with you who has skills for you to, and this is what I think is beautiful about EMDR, you can look at the things that you're the most scared to think about. Most people who experience trauma, they don't want to think about it. So if it comes up, it's like, nope, go back there. Like, because it creates so much distress.
Yeah.
And for people to learn, you can talk about the hardest things
Yeah.
in this space. And actually, I'm going to give you skills and tools and ways to ground yourself where you will actually like walk out of here, with less distress than when you started. And they're like, wow, I've never experienced that before.
Yeah.
I thought I couldn't talk about these things or I was just going to be a mess. And what I learned was actually talking about them made me feel less distressed over time.
So I have gone through now a few EMDR sessions with you myself. And I liken the experience to when you're a kid and you call your mom or your dad to your room, like, there's a monster in the closet, there's a monster in the closet, and you're just scared to death. You want to pull the covers up over your face. You don't want to look at it, but there's a monster. And your mom or your dad goes over to the closet and they open it up and you realize there's no monster in the closet. Or that monster that I thought was a monster, it was just a coat.
Yeah.
Or it seemed a lot scarier than it really was. And that's not to diminish, like, our experiences, because some of us have dealt with actual monsters and they were scary. But the thought of looking at them face forward or dealing with them or processing them, it's too scary. We want to pull the covers up over our eyes. EMDR is the pulling the covers down, somebody there who is safe, opening the door, and you looking together and being able to process through all of that, to where when I walked out of your office after doing those sessions, whenever that memory comes up, it just doesn't have the effect on me that it did before. I can think of it and not be affected negatively because we've processed it. So talk a little bit about EMDR. What is that? What do those letters stand for? And
I'm curious.
What's
the
basic?
nerd in me is like, I want to know all the
Oh,
names.
now you have me in my happy place. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And I am probably an interesting EMDR practitioner because I was not gung-ho about it. It was like kind of a vogue thing in our field. During a specific, well, even now, time period. And I just remember I'm kind of one of those people, I don't know what it says about me, but I'm like, if everybody else loves it, I roll. Like,
Yeah.
And so I actually I had my own personal therapist at the time. I had done probably, from the time I have a very extensive trauma background, I had a therapist since probably 13 years old, on and off, and I'd had a consistent therapist since adulthood. And I had done so much like talk therapy around my trauma history, but like you, I would still get in these situations where something would bring up the trauma history, and then I would have this like reaction, like physical bodily reaction. And I was like, I guess that's just normal. It's another thing I just normalized.
Right,
like, of course, like if you've had the trauma history that you've had, like this is just the way you have to live life. And one day I was talking to my therapist and I can't even remember what came up, but I just told her, like whenever this happens, like I'm back here again. And I guess that's just part of being traumatized. And she's like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, I've just accepted, like that's just life. You know, I've talked it out. I know all the right things.
Right.
Like I obviously know what happened to me wasn't my fault. And I can tell you all the right things through all this talk therapy, but my body is just still like,
Because again, trauma gets stuck in your nervous
body.
system, in your body. Okay.
Physical.
So she said, hey, I just got trained in this modality. And I'm like, are you going to say EMDR? But I also have this other weird quirk about me. It's like the grad school student in me. I will be your guinea pig for everything. It's why before we we were recording, I was telling you, I let like 20 something medical students, first pregnancy, baby, 28 weeks, like in the room. I'm like, yeah, sure. We all got to learn. And so I'm like, the two parts of me, the part of me that's like, no EMDR. And then the part of me that's like, okay, I'll be your guinea pig. Like, she's like, are you willing to just try it? And I'm like, sure, fine.
Yeah.
And so we do one session of EMDR around this memory that like had just impacted me since probably 7 years old. And like to this day now, like I just do not have the response to that that I did before. And so that's how I came to EMDR. And like to really nerd out. Well, do y'all have any questions? Because I'm just going to go on and just keep nerding.
Keep going.
So what's really fascinating to me about EMDR, I was thinking about this on the way over here. it's interesting from a scientific perspective because it's probably one of the most well-evidenced and researched therapy modalities that we have, to the point that like it's the frontline treatment for VA, for PTSD sufferers.
Man.
And so many people have researched that this works, and it works better than anything we've ever had, better than like cognitive-based therapies or all these other things that we've done for years. But this is the fascinating thing. Nobody can figure out why. Like there's some soft theories on why EMDR works, but they don't have like scientific, like this is why it works the way it does, which is fascinating because it's such a like physical based. It's different than talk therapy because, and I'll talk a little bit about what you actually do. It's very physical based, and so you would think with the technicalness of it and the physical basedness of it that like someone had really figured out, oh, we're gonna do this because X, Y, and Z, but that's not how it's come about, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
So EMDR uses bilateral stimulation. This is stimulating the left hemisphere of your brain and the right concurrently, like back and forth, to help you heal and reprocess from not just traumatic memories. Like I've actually used it for people who have like a fear or aversion. I work with eating disorder stuff. A lot of people who have a fear of like choking or even vomiting. And so we'll use EMDR to kind of process through that fear. They maybe have never even had a traumatic experience.
They're just afraid.
Yeah. I've used it for people who just have like a stuck place about body image. Anyway, so it just kind of helps you reprocess that. And the theory is that, you know, when we go to sleep every night, we go into REM sleep, which you dart your eyes back and forth, left to right, or maybe right to left, who knows. And it kind of does the same thing, but while you're in an awake state. And so the theory is that there's something that our brain is actually doing in that time. But this is what's interesting, that I think I read once like 76% in the upper high 70% of people who have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder also experience sleep disturbance. And so it's like, is the trauma causing the sleep disturbance? Or is the sleep disturbance preventing your brain from processing and healing from the trauma? So I always tell people, like, it's not hypnotism.
Right.
It's not magic. Like, it's helping your brain sort through material. And what is really cool about it is you're doing that in a very like regulated space. Whereas like when I always say when trauma like jump scares you, you're not in a regulated space.
Right. Yeah.
So to like sit in an office and actually like be taking a deep breath, looking back at these things, having somebody with you. And there's a lot of, as you know, setup for EMDR. We call it resource building, where we try to like give you resources to know how to go from emotional dysregulation, fight or flight response, to like feeling calm and safe, that you can do that. And so I think it just works in a number of ways. And I just don't know that we'll ever know for sure, like, oh, this is what it is, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because there's so much research out, you know, like I go back to my childhood education brain, where there's so much information out there about the importance of crossing those two hemispheres, or like, you know, like whether it, I don't know, there's all kinds of different things, tapping and like crossing the midline and what that does for your brain and all of that. So it makes sense that something like this would kind of help. But I love, can I talk about your picture of the train? So I love that, you know, if you're still going, okay, well, what is all this EMDR stuff? Like, it's the picture that you gave me as far as like being regulated is you're kind of on a train, and EMDR, like you're able to look out the window and see the thing. And then EMDR is kind of a process of like, I may not be getting this right, but then just kind of turning and being able to get yourself back to your centered, happy place. You're able to, rather than like live in that memory and be triggered by it, you're able to then just kind of look at it and not be scared of it, affected by it. You know, I don't know. It just takes you through this process of, and it's an exhausting process. It is a very exhausting process, but it's a worthy one because it just kind of, if that memory is a washcloth that holds water, EMDR is a process of just wringing that washcloth out until the washcloth is basically dry, if that makes sense. It's what it feels like to me anyway.
Yeah.
And it's such a good thing. Like, I'm so thankful for it because the few sessions that I had with you were memories that had bothered me since I was 5, and then to walk in, to an office and process that memory over and over and over and over in a safe space, and then an hour later walk out and go, like, no, that's not magic, but that is some kind of wonderful. Like,
I do say sometimes it's not magic, but
Yeah.
it is going to kind of a little bit feel that way.
Yeah, it is a little bit. Yeah.
What I would say about the train, that's really like a skill that we want you to be able to walk away with and
Right.
have.
Yeah.
So less about like how EMDR works and more like I want to make sure you have that skill.
Yes.
That you can like look out this window and say, okay, I'm acknowledging and honoring that this happened, but then I have also the ability, that's that regulation to
Yes.
dysregulation or regulation thing I talked about, to look out and go, okay, but there's also this
Yeah.
too. And the cool thing is it continues to work even after you're out of the session. Like your brain, that's why it's so exhausting. Your brain is actually continuing to process and kind
Yeah.
of sort and categorize.
Yeah.
I always use the metaphor as it's like almost like I had all of these memories and they were like a junk pile in the middle of a room, and EMDR kind of helped me sort them into like their proper space.
Yeah.
And now I know where those memories are. I have like an ability to go and find them, but they're not just like, oh, just there.
They're not going to pop out like that Jack in the Box from Elf.
Memories can feel like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you know what to identify? So, I mean, and maybe this is what you actually identify in a session. I don't know because I haven't experienced it. But like, if Ashley, did you know when you went in to see Celeste the first time that like you had this memory from 5 years old, this childhood memory that was bothering you, or is that something that y'all determined together?
Kind of both. Yeah.
There are kind of multiple routes that you can kind of take to figure that out. And so some people come in and they're like, this thing happened. I want to process it. The end, I actually have a teen client that I just did like, it just makes me so excited when I get to like, be like, oh, we got to close that chapter, this thing that impacted you. And this teenager actually came and said, I had this thing happen. I'd really like to process it. So some people come that way. And then some people, they kind of will come with more just life stuff going on. Like, I don't know what's going on, but every time I get in a fight with a friend, I just have this belief like I don't deserve love. And so this is kind of like a back route that sometimes you take with EMDR, because then what we'll do is like, okay, I want you to kind of, we call it a float back, to float back to the first time you ever remember feeling that way. And then they'll kind of like have a memory usually. And then I'll say, okay, then I want you to tell me like, what's the strongest time you ever remember feeling that way? Could be the same memory, could be different. And then what's the very last time you remember feeling that way? The other thing that I think is really neat about EMDR is we don't just focus on the past. We also focus on, okay, what in the present is being impacted by this? So you'll have like this past, I think I maybe told you this metaphor. I also think of it like sweeping a house. Sometimes you go all the way back to the past, and we're going to process this very first time you ever remembered believing I don't deserve love. And it could have been, maybe a parent walked out when you were 3 or 4 or 5. And then we may move up to, hey, then when you were like 20, you got a divorce or something, your spouse left you. And then we will work to, okay, last week, this friend told you, I don't have time to talk to you right now, and hung up on you. And so you kind of like clean forward. And then you actually will do what we call like a future template. And it's kind of like, okay, I want you to imagine going through a situation that normally would have triggered this thought. But this time you're going to hold the belief as you're kind of playing this film in your head. I do deserve love, and just kind of see what that feels like. And so it's kind of like this a treatment, not just to focus in the past, because how is your past impacting your present?
Yep.
And then how do you want your healing to impact your future?
I was hoping you were going to go there.
Yeah.
When you were talking about past and present, I was like, please tell me there's a future element, because
Yeah.
I feel like from just some of the, even like spiritual study that I've done, in addition to psychology things that I've read, our imagination is so powerful that if we're focusing on things that we really want to happen and we're really putting our intention there, like it's almost like it pulls us that direction. You know, like if we put enough belief behind it, that we start looking, if we're looking for those good things, we start to find them, you know,
Yeah.
like the brain starts searching for it. Like if I'm, ask you to find something yellow in the room, you're going to look for all the yellow things. Like you might even call something beige yellow, right? But then I'm like, but what's red in the room? Well, that beige might start to look a little bit more like red, because you're looking for it, kind of thing. Like that's some of the things that I've learned over the last few years. But it's interesting to me that is an important component in this aspect as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I'll often tell clients is, it's really fascinating to me, as someone who's done quite a bit of my own trauma work, but also trauma work with clients. I won't say never, but it's never happened in my experience that a person is actually the most harmed by the thing that happened. I've never seen it happen, that a person comes in and says, I am most harmed, that this, you could think of the most horrific thing that could happen to a person, and it's not that causes them the most harm. I would let you guess what it is, but we won't do that. I won't put you on the spot like that. It's actually what they believe about what happened, what they believe about themselves.
That makes sense.
What they believe about themselves.
So I have clients who have had horrific things happen, 3, 4, and 5, and they're actually carrying the belief in their mind, I should have done something. Like, I'm like, what would you have done? Like, have you ever met a 4-year-old? They're incredibly portable. What on earth in your mind did you think you would do?
Yeah.
And so CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a really popular type of therapy, would try to tell that person that. Hey, what could you have done? You could, and get them to see that. And I did that work from 18 to 30 something. And so, like I was saying earlier, I knew all the right things. Yeah, of course it wasn't my fault. I knew that logically, but it's like my body didn't know it.
Yeah.
And so it was showing up in my daily life that my body still couldn't look at those events and say, I did everything I could.
See, so EMDR, I feel like, invites your body into the picture. Whereas,
The nervous system.
Yeah, because everything else is so cognitively based, like the, that CBT, what you were talking about. It's just all in your head. But trauma, if it's stored in your body, you've got to invite your body into the picture at some point, or else there won't be full healing. And I feel like EMDR invites your body back into the process to heal and to process. And that's just, I don't know, it's just so fascinating, because it really does. It begins to take it from head knowledge into now your nervous system kind of starts to catch up.
So physically, what's happening when you're doing this?
EMDR?
Yeah,
Yeah,
with
so
your
that's
body.
the kind of bilateral stimulation.
What does that stimulation, what does that experience like, if you were going to describe it? So would I be looking left to right? Would I be following a pen? Would I be holding on to something? Like, what is that stimulation experience like?
Different for everybody. I used to do eye movement, and it's funny because they still call it eye movement desensitization, desensitization and reprocessing. But most therapists that I know don't do that anymore. It's because we were all getting one really strong arm. I would leave therapy, and you can't like windshield wiper people, so you can't get lazy about it. It had to be like straight across.
Oh, wow.
So I was saying, like, I was getting real buff on my right
Yeah.
side. That's what I would leave in my shoulder would hurt so bad. My massage therapist would be like, what do you do? And she was like expecting me to say like construction work.
Right.
Like, I'm a therapist.
What do you do with that right arm, lady?
She's like, wow, your arm is so tight, your shoulder. And so actually now I use something called tappers, and they're these little buzzers that you hold in your hand.
Okay.
I actually like them more because a lot of clients got really, I would say, dissociated, which we can talk a little bit about what that is, in when we were doing eye movement and whether they were doing it right or not. It was like too active for them, and they're like, I don't know if I'm following your fingers right or not.
Yeah.
And now the tappers are a little more like, you can't be doing it wrong. You're just holding these tappers.
Because you're closing your eyes, and what I noticed is, because I was trying to I remember the first couple of times I'm trying to like, all right, be in the moment, do the deal. But I'm like, oh, my eyes are moving to the tappers. Like, I gotcha. Eye movement. Okay. All right.
Yeah. A lot of people will like kind of move their eyes back and forth. But even just the like buzzing from left to right is good. Some people will use like a light bar. With kids, I've actually like used like leg tapping, or like I have a little like I'll have like fun things like a feather or something like that. And I'll tap, their knee with it. And some people, you can actually do EMDR on your own. Spoiler, they do something called a butterfly tap, which is where you like cross your thumbs together and you make like a butterfly with your hands, like when you were a kid, and you actually like tap left to right on your collarbone. So sometimes I'll do that for my own self, like after I've had a typically like really challenging session where maybe it's some, distressing content that I'll just spend like 5 minutes in my office. That's probably what I didn't do that day. I came home to my daughter. I'm just sitting on my couch. Tapping. There's something calming. And if you think about it, like that's why we rock babies, right? There's something just soothing about that kind of like undulation or rocking, it's why
because with those tappers, it was at first finding a rhythm that felt kind of calming or like soothing in a way, like not too fast because that kind of stresses me out, but okay, right there, like that's a good like so it's kind of personalized that way too.
Interesting.
Yeah
I'm so fascinated by this. I've looked into EFT some as well, which is tapping, right? And it's tapping different meridian points. Is that correct?
I am not trained in EFT.
Are you not?
I can find you someone who is.
No, well, I mean, no, I've just looked at YouTube videos. So, I mean, it's nothing super professional. It's just, I find it interesting because, kind of like acupuncture, like there's different physical sensations in our body that affect how we feel emotionally, different ways to treat it. But this sounds fascinating. I want to try it.
So when you think about trauma, I think about it like a hand, right? And it's like your brain is in the middle of the hand, and then you have all these little neuro pathways, which would be your fingers. And neuro pathways can be memory content. Some people, when they process through EMDR, that's all they ever share. But this happened, and they're like, okay, I feel better now, Some people, like, they'll go through the memory content, and then they'll move to, like, emotional content. Well, I was just so scared. I was just so sad. And then they may be like, okay, I'm good now. And then some people like will do both of those, and they'll go through, we call it like cognitive content thoughts, I should have done something. I deserved this, I can't trust people, whatever. And some people are good there. And then some people will move to like body content. I'm feeling stress in my shoulders, or I'm feeling a tension in my chest. What I've noticed is most people have to process through all four of those avenues for like a memory. I kind of will joke it's like a clogged pipe. Like it's something's clogged in there at one of those points or several of them. And we are just kind of work to like filter it out and let it
I was
go on
sitting there
its merry
thinking,
way.
I identify with all four of them.
Yes.
Most people, yep. Okay, most people, I can deal with that.
It's very rare that somebody's like, okay, I talked about the memory and I'm good now. It's usually clogged somewhere else. And so you're kind of watching for like so after you do a set of bilateral kind of tapping or stimulation, a set is usually like, we call it 24 passes from left to right, or 28, somewhere in there. It just depends. Then you kind of just have the person take a deep breath, and I'll say, hey, what did you notice? And they'll kind of share a little bit about whatever their brain was thinking. And actually the only reason why I even need to know that is like, okay, I kind of want to know like what neuro pathway are we on? Because sometimes people get really stuck in one, and sometimes I'll have to like kind of help them process through that. And then also you're looking for, have they reached a place of like more positive content, like they may get to a place where like, like I'm noticing there's nothing I could do. I did everything I could. And you're like, that's what you're kind of looking for. And so then you kind of will strengthen that a little bit and say, okay, I want you to hold this memory with the thought, I did everything I could, and notice this like peaceful feeling that you have in your body right now, this calm, this relaxation. It's like people have never held those two things together. Yeah. I've never held my trauma together with a positive thought and like calm feelings. It's always been judgment and tension,
Yeah.
I think people just holding a calm feeling within themselves is pretty rare in general.
Yeah.
I mean, just in day-to-day life, just that, there may be somebody listening that's thought, I don't know what that feeling ever feels like in my body, just because we don't slow down, or we're always so stimulated by our phone. I mean, there's so much I was thinking about this the other day. I don't remember what I was listening to, but it was something advocating for meditation and just sitting and being still and quiet with yourself. And it's something I used to do even before I understood what that was. Just when I was a teenager, sometimes I would be so overstimulated from school, practice, or whatever. I would come home and I would just lay down on my bed and be quiet. It's like, I'm not even sure I know how to do that anymore, because I have a phone in my hand 24/7 and I'm listening to a podcast or an audiobook, or I'm looking at YouTube and I'm thinking I'm learning things. I'm educating myself, but it's overstimulation.
Yeah.
Right.
And so just the thought of just being calm is like a good reminder.
Yeah. So therapists like to use words, and sometimes I try to avoid this because they're words that we all use, but nobody really knows what they mean. So I'm going to use two, and then I'm going to try to explain what they mean.
Okay.
Meditation is in essence mindfulness. And EMDR is actually, I always call it sneaky mindfulness, because you're actually having to have awareness around things, versus just a reaction, just I didn't think about it in the moment reaction. And what you're describing, this constantly being on the phone, constantly having to have something to do, is dissociation. And that is when you say, being in the body, that's rare. Yeah. Especially traumatized people. They walk around like floating heads,
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll say, hey, where do you feel that in your body? And they're like, what?
What are you talking about?
What is this question? You're a body, and feelings in it? I don't know. Do you feel feelings in it? And I'm like, yeah, you do actually. Feelings are the
really
language of the
common,
body. Yeah. And so I think we all, for the most part, walk around so dissociated from being present and sitting in our bodies. And now we have more ability to do that than ever.
It's become the bourbon in our coffee.
Oh, for sure. If I go home and I'm scrolling reels or whatever for hours, I sometimes will have this moment of what are you trying to not think about or feel right now? Yeah. Because that's not what I want to do. If you were to ask me, what do you want to do? With your precious hours here on earth?
I want to be present. I want to be, and that's not to say that from time to time scrolling reels is a bad thing, because there are those that will go, oh no, I'm doing it wrong. It's just when it becomes the bourbon and the coffee, when it becomes the thing that helps you cope.
We used to have this joke. I worked in adolescent intensive outpatient programming for eating disorders, and we would ask them at the beginning of every group, these teenagers, what's a skill you used this week to help with your eating disorder? And they would always say, I used mindful distraction. And I'm like, wait, what does that mean? And they're
Instagram.
they were like, I was intentionally and mindfully on Instagram for hours or watching Netflix. I'm like, they knew it was the sneaky back route, because if they would have been like, oh, I spent hours on Instagram.
That's hilarious.
But were you being mindful? Yes, I was. I was very aware.
But I think about that, but it's true. I do it. And sometimes I think I'm just going to spend some time looking at pretty pictures or some really nice quotes that are going to make me feel good or make me think something, train my brain a little bit. And then next thing I know, 2 hours has passed and I've only looked at that quote for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
It's not like I've actually looked at something that was empowering and really sat with it and thought, how does this feel? What does this make me think about? Just marinated in it for a minute. I've scrolled to the next one, the next pretty picture and the next fun quote, the next success, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's distraction.
Yeah.
It's straight distraction.
Yeah. And I feel like just this work in general, if there's still somebody going, all right, but still, why should I even put in this effort? I think that, I don't know. I think that anytime, if we are living our lives not acquainted with ourselves, with our trauma, then we won't know how to fully reach or see other people. There's something that in the last year has been so powerful to me, and that is that it's a quote from somewhere. So sorry, I can't give the credit, but just you're only going to love and know others as much as you love and know yourself. And if you don't deal with your trauma, if you don't deal with your stuff, then you're not going to know yourself very well, because you're not going to realize that you're actually reacting as opposed to living on purpose. And then if you don't do the work to know yourself, you're never going to be able to fully see or know the people in front of you. And some people can't get to the place where just for themselves they want to do this work, but if you can frame it to, you're going to be able to love your kids better. You're going to be able to love your spouse better. You're going to be able to be a better friend when you do this work. Sometimes that's kind of the motivating factor, I think, for people. And hopefully they'll get to the place to want it just for themselves, because you're worthy just to do it for you, and you don't do this for other people. There will be a benefit though. But yeah.
I love that you're saying that, because that actually ties back to something that I was thinking when we were talking about just kind of this generational thing, and I shared about my pep ball. And this may sound mean, but I'm just going to say it. When we don't heal, we're burdening other people with our lack of healing.
That's good.
And so often it's our children, and who would want to do that?
Yeah.
Like, we're about to go backpacking with our two littles for the first time ever. We've backpacked with our two oldest, and we're like, whoo, this 3-year-old's a wild card.
Get a leash.
She'll either run the whole 3 miles and set up camp herself, or she's gonna be like, you're carrying me. And what is she gonna eat? We're just gonna strap like a pack of tortillas and a jar of Nutella onto her back and be like, go.
She'll be good.
But like, I wouldn't, if she couldn't walk anymore, if she was like, I can't go anymore, I'm not leaving her in the wilderness. I'm not like, well, good luck with you. Hope you make it out. And so I think our job as parents is to shoulder burdens so our kids don't have to. And like, I don't say that in a blamey way to parents who have had undealt with and unprocessed trauma, because I know they were doing the best that they could. But if my pep ball could have like gotten some real freedom and healing, it's very likely that I wouldn't be burdened by a lot of the things that I had to heal from. Yeah. Like I will so often joke with clients. I'll be like, oh, just Apple Pay that person, like send them a Venmo request. Because like, and that's every parent's worst nightmare, right? Yeah. What are you telling your therapist about me? And it's like, if that's a fear, then go heal whatever it is. Cause you know then. I know what I did last week wasn't okay. I had to process that with my therapist. And then just last night I sat down with my oldest. This is a mindful distraction. She likes to share TikToks with me. I actually don't even have my own TikTok. I only watch TikToks with her. She's like, Mom, do you want to watch some TikToks with me? And I'm like, yeah. So we sat and watched TikToks. And then I said, hey, I need to tell you something. And she said, what? And I said, last week when you were upset with your dad, the way I handled that was not okay. And I can imagine me giving you my lecture was not what you needed at the time. And it was probably really frustrating and hurtful. And if I had it to do all over again, I would have taken a pause and noticed I wasn't in the space to have that conversation at the time, to have it the way I wanted to. And I'm just really sorry that I hurt you. And she was like, thanks, Mom.
You know,
you did kind of suck.
You did suck in that moment. But you know that, we could go on and on and on. We could talk all day. But, you know, I've even had moments here recently with my own mom. And she has had these just, I don't know, very self-aware moments of, hey, you know, and we weren't even talking about anything, but just, hey, you know, when I did that or I didn't do that, I am so sorry. And the 12-year-old me gets healed in that moment. And there's something to that, you know?
I had a similar conversation with my mom recently. I've been going through some stuff and I was sort of sharing it all with her, and I was feeling really guilty about some decisions that I had made and the ways that I had behaved where I wasn't in a calm space and I was reacting. We all do it. And so I was sharing all of that with her, and she looked at me and she said, do you know how guilty I feel every day for the way I raised you and your brother? And I was like, Mom, and my brother's had a series of challenges in his adult life. He's not in a very good place, but I was like, Mom, that it's not your fault. I was like, I know you did the best you could with what you had. Like that's, it is what it is. Like you can't go back and change that. Don't feel guilty about it. Like I don't need you. I mean, thank you for telling me that you care enough to like be concerned, but like also it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, like I wish she would go talk to somebody. She's got plenty to talk about. I'm sure I've given her plenty to talk about. You know, I wasn't an easy child to raise. But also, like, some of the memories that she shared with me from her childhood, you know, I just hurt for her. I think, man, what could be lifted off of her if she would go process some of it, you know?
Yeah.
What we don't process, we will project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that's true?
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, like, as pro therapy as I am, not everybody has access to that.
Right.
Just time, money, energy. And there are other paths to healing. There are really great books. There are a lot of really great podcasts. There are a lot of really great Instagram, TikTok accounts. Lots of people talking about kind of attachment wounds I see now, which is really empowering and helpful for people. Do I think that everybody would benefit from therapy? Yes. Do I think it's the only path to healing? No. And so I would say to some people, like, if that's too scary for you, like,
Start here, maybe.
pick up some books, you know?
Can you leave us today? Can you leave us a list and we'll put it in show notes of just where to maybe some books to start with?
Okay.
Maybe a long list, but that's good.
But good. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
it
can
would
kind
be
of
good.
even like sort like through like separate, like different kinds of issues. I
Yeah.
love to joke about this one. I'm sure everybody's heard about it. There's a great trauma book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, we talked about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, I wish she would stop. It's kind of rude.
No, right?
Stop keeping the score.
That.
Yeah.
You're being a witch, buddy. Stop it.
We could talk to you all day, and I know
Yes.
you don't have time for that, but we have a few series of just silly questions we like to ask at
Love
the
it.
end. Do you want to start?
Yes. So what is your coffee order?
Oh, I'm so boring. I just like black coffee with half and half, or sometimes I'll get a flat white with half and half, or a latte with half and half. Apparently, I really like half and half.
Half and half's good.
You know what you like.
Do you have a favorite cocktail?
I'm really not a drinker. So I just am, if I drink anything, it's either a beer or like a hard cider.
Nice. Oh, I love the Angry Orchard.
Oh, yes.
Good.
Crisp apple. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I haven't had one of those in years.
They're good.
I had a friend that really enjoyed them, and we would drink them together. And yeah, just
There's a place in
refreshing.
Austin that had, I think it's East Austin cider, and they'll do these like seasonal flavored ciders. Oh, they're so good.
That sounds good.
It does sound good. If you had the opportunity to go anywhere in the world, plane ticket was covered, you're staying someplace really nice, as swanky or as minimal as you want it, where would you go and why?
Oh my goodness. I have such like wanderlust. So this is like, we're taking an entire month off in July and just
Really?
like traveling through
good.
Colorado. Yeah,
Amazing.
my kids have been to 30 states.
That's awesome.
Anyway, that's such a toss up. Okay. If my kids were grown and out of the house, I would say New Zealand. But also a big dream of mine is to hike the Pacific Crest Trail.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's you hike from Mexico to Canada.
Oh,
I've
wow.
always wanted to do that. So that's our retirement plan.
Nice.
So cool.
Love that.
That's such a great answer. We've gotten some interesting answers. That one's,
That's a good one.
that's a really good one.
That's a good one.
How can people find you, Celeste?
So my website is Celeste Smith Therapy. I didn't say Celeste because if I say Celeste, people will put an A in
An
it.
A.
There's no A. It's an E with an accent, and they don't let you do E's with accents on
else?
the search. So it's just CELESTE SmithTherapy.com. Yeah.
Excellent. And thank you for offering to put some resources in the show notes. I'm sure it will be helpful and impactful for a lot of people.
Yeah. Happy to do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
The Celebrating Women podcast wants to hear from you. Find us on social media at facebook.com/Celebrating Women Podcast or on Instagram, search Celebrating Women Podcast. You can also email us a voice message to celebratingwomenpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear your story or the story of an incredible woman you know. Send it to celebratingwomenpodcast@gmail.com. The Celebrating Women podcast has been presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in Cumberland Shopping Center or online at handandstonetyler.com. The Celebrating Women podcast is created and hosted by Mandee Montana and Ashley Fisher. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Celebrating Women podcast.